Welcome to the Clutch Burners podcast tonight. Your location for all the cool stick shift stuff, racing, tech, stories, and, well, our good looks. Over there, that's Rich Guido, aka the Canadian Chuck Norris.
And that's Bang Shift Billy, inventor of the Bang Shift Billy.
Awesome. And we have a very special guest tonight. We've got Mr. LT record holder, Mr. 6-second stick car, Mr. fastest H pattern on the planet Earth, and Mr. Tick Performance. Can you guess who that is, Rich?
Yeah, the guy who's costing me a lot of money so far. I don't know how he went faster and it cost me money, but Jonathan Atkins is in the house.
Yes, Jonathan Atkins.
Hey,
how you doing, sir?
Good. How you guys doing?
Oh, we're pretty good. Appreciate you getting on here. I know it's although I can still see the sun out in you, it's a little bit later for you.
Yeah.
But appreciate you jumping on here with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, Rich, I think you had a funny story for the week.
Well,
maybe not even car related or sort of.
It seems like
kind
it's
of
always
jacked up deal.
It's like Rich's dumbass story for the week. Yeah, so Travis will put a picture on here, but I've been looking at a sagging deck for the whole summer thinking I got to fix that.
Did you say sagging deck?
Sagging deck, yeah, like the deck had a bit of a woo in it. And so there was a couple of rotten pieces of wood under there. So I did what any car guy would do. I got some 6x6s and took two of my car jacks underneath my deck, jacked the deck up. Didn't lose any teeth, don't have any scars, any new scars. But it did work well. And Travis will throw a picture on there, and it looks a little seedy, but yeah, car guys, we're creative. You got to do what you got to do. So it worked well. So anyways, have a look at the picture. It's pretty funny.
Nice. All right. So, Jonathan, again, super flattered you're on here. But
yes,
let's talk about, you broke the internet this week. Let's talk about that. You and Garrett both made side-by-side personal best passes, and then you then broke the stick shift record again, like a few hours later.
Well, that was the second time you broke it in the same day, right?
My mistake. Yeah. I'm so blinded by the limelight here. So go ahead, Jonathan. Tell us about it. Give us some history. We'll ask you lots of questions, but just feel free to ramble.
Yeah. We set the H pattern record earlier that day before racing Garrett, in that 4-car shootout that they had. So we went a 675 at 2:13, I think, and kind of blew our mind because it was like 2 p.m. I think maybe, sun was bearing down on the track, and we kind of put a tune in it, with what we thought we'd go into the, the next round later in the evening, but we just wanted to see if it would stick because we'd already had a good qualifying run with like a 703. So we threw a little bit more at it than I thought would probably work, but it worked. I mean, the track was phenomenal, and it went to 675. We were, just super jacked up about that. And then in the 4-car shootout, which, was not something that was originally scheduled to happen, Victor, the owner of Bradenton and, the guy who puts on FL2K, they started announcing for me and David Farlow to come to the tower to see if we wanted to do a grudge match. And it turned into a 4-car shootout pretty quick. And, they were calling it Stick Shift versus the World and, hyping it up pretty heavy. And so we didn't run our 5th round of qualifying because we knew we were going to get that pass at the end of the night. And ended up going to 661 at 216. 111 60 foot, I think. So it was pretty killer pass. Exceeded our expectations, I think, along with everybody else. But
did you jack it up from the 675 pass, or were the conditions just better?
We did turn it up some. We turned up, I think we might have added a little bit to the launch RPM. We added some boost, coming off the line from where we were at with the 675. It was mainly the same pass as far as, like down track and the boost ramp and that kind of stuff, just left a little more aggressively. And then in 4th gear, about midway through 4th gear, I'd say I got on the scramble button because I didn't realize that he had red lit, and we were pretty close. He was a car out basically. And so I grabbed the scramble which was kind of crazy because I mean, this is not the race we went to, to race. We were just in this 4-car shootout deal. But it took the scramble too, and that probably contributed a little bit to the mile per hour gain that we had, was just that last little bit of extra boost that we had on it. So
And,
Is that,
and how
is that
much
like-
did you have in the scramble?
well, I think we had 60 on the dome or something like that, and the scramble added another 20, to the dome pressure. So, it picked up another 10 or so pound of boost, when I grabbed the scramble.
Dude, so Jonathan, like, I'm lucky if I ever even put 20 pounds of boost to my setup. you're like scrambling 3 times. Like, it's retarded.
Yeah, well, we got this little tiny small block Chevy engine, and it's probably not the most efficient cylinder heads and intake manifold and everything else. So to go fast and make lots of power, we got to run lots of boost.
Well, I mean, clearly it doesn't work very well.
yeah, it's hardly. It's 340 cubes. Is that what it is, Jonathan?
It's 348.
348.
Yeah.
Freaking crazy.
So
Yeah,
so let's get in. I am curious some of the details on this. So it's like a Gen 1 small block Chevy, not an LS.
Right. Yeah. The engine we had ran up until this actual race has always just been a stock block LT1. So like the original block that, the 97 Camaro would have came with. We did put a bow tie block in the car for this race. First time out. We actually made a couple test hits at an 8th mile track before coming to Florida, but that's all we made. But basically it's the same engine as the LT1 was. It's just a Gen 1 style block, which we don't run any water in the engine. So the main difference between a Gen 1 and a Gen 2, like the LT1 we ran, is just the cooling system, the reverse flow cooling. And of course, they had the OptiSpark distributor, that everybody beats up on and hates, so badly about those engines. But, all that stuff's gone. So essentially the LT1 we had been running anyway was, a 350 small block Chevy. And the difference between this engine is just it's like a 4130 bore now instead of a 4030 bore. So
Nice. Well, that helps the heads breathe for sure.
yeah, we went to the larger bore, and then we got a set of the next level up Brodix Track 1 heads. So we went from a 233 to a 245, and that bumped our intake valve size up a little bit from like a 210 to a 212. A little bit larger cam, but otherwise the same stroke, same intake manifold. It's really about the same engine, just that bore size difference.
And the water delete option, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, what? We don't do any drag and drives with this one. We push it everywhere it goes with a golf cart. So,
So for the people listening, when you say reverse flow, can you talk about that for a sec?
yeah, the Generation 2 small block Chevy, which, the LT1 engines, like from the 90s, they had a different way of flowing the water, which just basically meant that the water went into the cylinder head first and then came out through the block. Instead of, normal engine, small block Chevy would go into the block and it comes out through the intake manifold, through the heads and then out the intake. But the LT didn't have, a thermostat housing on the intake. It was on, part of the water pump. So it was a better, I think it was an improvement over the Gen 1 small block Chevy stuff as far as performance is concerned. The LT engines were, you could run more compression and get by with a lot more because of that. But with our engine, it's, fully filled block, solid heads, no water jackets even cast into them. So
The heads, you don't even run any water in the heads either.
No water anywhere.
Well,
so just
run
methanol.
Yeah.
So methanol, and you figure with the burnout in the past, you're running it for 12 seconds at a time, right?
Yeah, basically. We'll fire it up and let it warm up in the, the staging lanes for a minute or two, depending on where our position as we're coming out onto the track. But we don't really worry about temps, very much because
there's no temperature gauge.
Even really monitors all temp.
There's nothing to worry about.
Water temp's perfect.
Yeah, we watch all temperature, but usually we'll go out on the track. It'll be somewhere around 100, 110 degrees all temp, and by the end of the track, I usually let the car idle until we make the turn off, just to kind of let the turbo cool down, keep all going to that, and it's usually around 135, 140, so it doesn't get very hot.
I'm curious about valve train, cam, lifters, all that stuff. Do you mind going into a little detail on that?
Yeah, no, I don't mind the cam. It's a small block Chevy cam size as far as core goes. Nothing big or special about that. I don't even know what the size of that is, but it's tiny in comparison to an LS or a big block Chevy or just about anything else. But it's comp cam or comp grinds the cam for us. Martin Smallwood at Smallwood Race Development, he actually specs the cam that's in the car now. He's done the last couple of cams for us. As far as the specs go, I don't even know if I could quote them off the top of my head, but it's somewhere in the low 260s duration at 50 intake, low 270s exhaust, around 800 lift.
Yeah, that's a lot for that little motor.
Yeah.
Pretty rowdy.
Yeah, it's got a lot of overlap. So I mean, it sounds like a nasty NA engine, when it's idling. And of course, it's in a small cubic inch too. So that makes it that much nastier or rowdier.
And did I hear you spin that thing to 9,200?
Yeah, I think on the pass against Garrett, we were at 9,000. We turned it up to 9,200 before the weekend was over. Hold on a second.
Yeah, no problem.
I was real busy before we jumped on here, and so I'm not like super organized. We were throwing rocks at a hornet's nest.
Nice. Yeah, I want to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's my son's birthday was today. He turned 9, so we had some family and some of his friends and stuff over, and we discovered a huge hornet's nest across our driveway in the woods.
Is that like a special kind of piñata?
It is. We threw 2x4s at it and had a slingshot. And
were you blindfolded in proper piñata fashion?
No, we definitely didn't want to be blindfolded. We did have to run across the yard a few times.
That's like initiation when you turn 9 and
oh my God.
in the Carolinas. Go get that off the tree there, son.
Did you guys get it down?
Did we get it down?
Yeah.
No.
Or did you just piss them off?
Oh, they were definitely mad.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the transmission. We saw some pictures online this week. I even commented that, looks like something's missing there. I know what it is, but I don't want to spoil it. So
what is it?
Oh, it might have been 5th and 6th gear were missing from the transmission.
Oh, you're saying in my transmission?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't run 5th and 6th.
Yeah.
Is that strictly weight savings, rotating weight, or it doesn't add any strength?
I use mostly just weight savings. I mean, I think the 5th and 6th components, the synchro, the blockers, the fork, everything, we weighted at one point in time. It was like 10 pounds. So we do it for that. We modify the shift rail inside, basically lock together the 5, 6 and reverse lever. There's a secondary rail that actuates those gears. So we make a couple of spacers and make that piece become like one piece. And then we cut one of those levers off. And what we're doing is putting reverse gear, the selector into the slot where 5th would have been. So then we modify the reverse lockout with a piston that we make, CNC. And so what that essentially does is when we go from 2nd to 3rd gear, there's no way you're going to miss it. There's no 5 and 6 like empty slots there where we pulled gears out, but everything's as far as shift rail functions like a slot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that lockout, the way we modified it's solid. There's no spring, so there's no way to physically bypass it or override it. The electronic side of it has to work. But as long as everything's working, we're going to come out of 2nd and go, clean into 3rd, 100 out of 100 times.
Nice. So, and I know Rich and I are both curious, but first of all, what ECU you running?
We run a Holly Dominator.
Okay, so how are you managing your clutchless shifting? Like, what are you doing? Like torque management type of deal. What do you do that?
Yeah, we've tried a couple of different things, but the basic principle and how we still ended up doing it through the weekend is we just run the engine into the rev limiter. So it's a total hard ignition cut, and when it basically, you know, how a rev limiter would normally work is you'd set your high side to say, in our case, you know, we're shifting at 9,000. So high side, we set at 9,000. And normally the low side would be like 50 or 40 RPM less. But what we're doing is we actually set the low side of the limiter about 15 or 1700 RPM less. So when it drives into the limiter, I already put some pressure on the shifter, you know, toward the next gear. So when it hits that cut, it just instantly jams into the next gear. And then, you know, that large split in the, you know, the rev limiter's high and low side gives you just enough time to get it clean into the next gear.
Yeah.
And then once it goes into the next gear, because the clutch never got disengaged, it mechanically has to drag the RPM below that reignite point.
Yep.
And it just works super seamless. You know, it's super simple.
So, and I have another more detailed question in regards to that. I utilize the same tactic. What are you utilizing some type of a timing cut or ramp the timing back in on the shift? And the reason I ask is on my setup, and I have a different clutch, and we'll talk about that, but my clutch doesn't slip at all. And if I don't do that timing cut, like I've twisted the input shaft and more than I'd like to admit.
He's got a flower pot and it looks like all input shafts.
Yeah. Those are some
Yeah,
expensive flowers.
Yeah, no, we don't do anything as far as a timing retard when it comes back in. I mean, it's on that hard cut, and when it goes to the next gear, it's straight back in, you know, full power. There's no timing retard or a duration, you know, time-based retard or anything. It's just right back to it.
On your data log, do you see a little clutch, a little flare, just a tiny flare as the clutch gives a little on that shift when it clicks back on?
There is. Yeah. I mean, the clutch tune or the clutch adjustment's gonna, you know, accommodate and kind of allow what we're doing to work, because there is a moment, you know, where it re-engages, it does have slip, and depending on the power we have in the car, you know, like on the pass against Garrett, we carried slip pretty much the whole entire pass. It's just as the RPM is coming up in each gear, the slip percentage is, you know, getting closer and closer to the, you know, the engine RPM, the input speed sensor, you know, or the input speed is getting closer to RPM. But it slipped really on that pass more than we would, you know, really like to see. But it was, you know, it was fast. It's just that clutch, you know, life doesn't last very long if you let it slip that much.
Got to take the disc out and rub it on the concrete a couple of times to get it to clean up.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we've seen that before.
I was getting ready to say, we've been known to, you know, rub a piece of gravel against it. You know, we like throwing rocks at bees' nests and rubbing our clutch disc with them too, I guess.
Do you say nice things to your clutch? Like, I'm so sorry that what we're about to do to you.
Not really.
Okay.
We've pushed the clutch that's in the car way past the point that the clutch manufacturer is comfortable with. I mean, we're still running the old stamp steel 3-lever. You know, it's just crazy. You know, they have 5/16 bolts, you know, that hold the pressure plate to the flywheel. And
yeah,
Rob,
I have the same one. I'm still dialing it in, but it is crazy that you've went that fast with 2 8-inch discs. Like,
yeah.
So what is the weight? What is the weight of Grubworm?
The weight of the car?
Yeah, with you in it.
It's just shy of 2,800 pounds. I haven't weighed it. You know, I weighed it at the beginning of this year, and I think it weighed 2870 something, or I mean 2770 something. So, you know, it's about 20 pounds shy of 2,800.
So Rich, that's just about 1,000 pounds shy of you and I.
That's 12, just about 1,300 shy of me.
Woo!
But different applications and
For sure.
Yeah. We know Jonathan's not doing any drag and drive events, but it didn't really matter that day.
Yeah. So talk to us about the clutch. So twin 8-inch, same as Rich is running. It's what is it, Rich? Advanced clutches?
Advanced clutches from Rob Youngblood. Yep.
Nice. Okay.
Now, I don't know if either of those guys, Kale or Rob, will listen to this, but it is very entertaining trying to get advice from those guys. One of them's a pro stock guy, and the other guy's a super stock guy. So they both they have some different. Neither one of them does drag and drive events, but I think we've got them both to work pretty good for our applications. And like I was chatting with you, Jonathan, at that with the clutch ear run, and I did my best 60-foot ever, and the graph looked really hokey to me, but apparently it looks similar to yours. But so yeah, they work. They're quite amazing. To hear you say that you slipped it the whole time and it still went 216 miles an hour, that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. It's the advanced clutch. I've never ran anything other than that. When I went to adjustable, I mean, that's what I went to first, and that's what we've used this whole time in this car. And like you said, I mean, some of the advice you get, and I'm not talking bad about
No,
Rob or Kale or anything like that, but it's just what we're doing is so far out, in left field compared to what they do or have seen, or usually what they would consider normal, I guess, because we're on the radial, and the clutch has to do all of the work. There's no wheel speed or tire slip or anything. It's like the clutch has to do everything, and we're racing a car that needs to leave the starting line at maybe 800 or 900 horsepower, and then a second and a half into that pass, it's on 60 pounds of boost, making 2,000. It's been a challenge and a huge learning experience, and I think we've kind of blown Rob's mind at advance too, because he it's to the point now where he's like, man, you gotta get the billet, because see, I bought a billet 8-inch from him, just got it a couple weeks ago or a couple weeks before Florida, and we put it in the car and we tested. We made 2 passes, and then that's when we broke the transmission, when it turned the entire bottom of the car blue.
Is that when you painted the whole bottom of the car blue?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, for one, the transmission may have broke just because it was the 3rd season on the majority of those parts. I mean, we've had a lot of luck or success with the transmissions that we've done in our car, and that thing had been running a long time. So, it could just be the transmission was tired and there was a crack that formed, and, it just happened to break then. But sort of feel like it was where that clutch was just overly tight. It was a new clutch, new to us, the car and the suspension and everything's really sorted out well. But this new clutch was just too tight, and we broke. And part of that was Rob had used some discs that were, kind of not really what he would have preferred to use. It's just the way things are nowadays is what he could get.
Yeah.
So we
Same place. Yeah.
Yeah, we were just kind of trying something, and he was, had a little bit of feedback from other customers that were tearing those discs up. So he wanted us to, be really aggressive or tight with our clutch adjustment, on the couple initial passes, to just kind of seat everything in. And, if we slipped it real bad, the discs were going to come apart, was his fear. So we were overly tight with our clutch adjustment, and we broke. And then, we didn't have time to make more test hits before Florida. So we ended up just putting our whole entire old school, stamp 3-lever deal back in the car. But it's just a safety concern at this point, the old stuff with the little 5/16 bolts, and, we've got to make that move to the billet.
Yeah, it's hard when you know what works though with what you have, and you have to try to go to something new.
So Jonathan, tell us, I mean, clearly you have a good transmission builder, because I think you own Tick Performance. So tell us a little bit about Tick, like employees, how long you've been in business, how it started. Just give us some history.
Yeah. Tick Performance was actually started by my dad. He was just like a shade tree guy, he worked in a furniture factory pretty much his whole life, but he was a shade tree mechanic, did a few, street and strip type cars, engines. Basically, he would do engines for all the local guys. And so he ended up losing his job at the furniture factory that he was working at about 20 years ago, and just decided he wanted to open a garage. It was something he enjoyed, and wanted to work on performance work, engines and performance related things. So he just did whatever was necessary to get a business license, and just rented a little tiny section of a building, and, you know, Tick Performance was born, I guess. And he started getting some more. I mean, this was in 2003, I think, when we first started. So we're like 19 years into it now.
Where's the name come from?
Well, I wish my dad was sitting here because he could tell you a good story about it. I'll give you the Cliff Notes. That was a nickname that my dad had among his friends. You know, they called him Tick. All the car guys knew him as Johnny the Tick.
Okay.
And the reason they called him that, to make a long story short, is you know, this was back in the 70s, I guess, you know, late 70s or whatever.
So the late 1900s.
Yeah. So he was, you know, out in the you know, we're from a small town, you know, Mount Airy's a real small town. And he was gonna, you know, street race this other guy in town that had like a Ford Torino or whatever it was with a 390 or something in it. And they were going to race my uncle's Chevelle, which was a 350, you know, small block 350. And, you know, in their discussion of, you know, this race that was about to happen, my dad told that guy that that Chevelle with that small block 350 would outrun that Ford whatever 100 times out of 100 times, as many times as they want to do it. And then when they got done, he'd open the hood and he'd show them that it was as stock as a Tick. And, you know, it's just a really stupid thing to say. You know, it's like, what does that even mean? They all kind of made fun of him, I guess, was the story, you know, and they started calling him Tick. And, you know, so when he decided he wanted to open a performance shop, he thought, well, I'm going to name it Tick. And then all my car buddies, you know, that even if they don't know I started a shop, that's, you know, they're going to think about me and they're going to know it's my place. So that's why, you know, that's why it got named Tick. And
that's a great story.
Yeah. And the Chevelle one, right? Or,
oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just you heard that, hey Bill?
No, it broke
GM,
up there for a second.
The GM one, Bill.
Can't hear you. What, Rich? What's your quickest ET so far, Rich?
Oh, it's 877, Bill.
Okay.
What's yours?
870. And let's see, which one's a GM product? I can't remember. Pontiac. That's under the GM flag, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Come on, I got to carry the Ford flag. You know that.
That's a pretty cool story about your dad, though. I was going to ask you about your dad because I see him at the races with you, and you know, after you ran 661, everybody was running over to him and congratulating him. That's pretty cool. My dad does all the drag and drive stuff with me too. He's turning 80 this year, and there's no slowing him down. And it doesn't look like there's any slowing your dad down either. So he looks like he's having a ball and enjoying you carrying on the legacy for sure.
Yeah. Rich, tell everybody what your dad said when you did that street race.
Which street race?
Don't break the car because.
Oh, yeah. It's when I went down to Oklahoma to do the last race with Bill. That's all my dad said. He says, "Don't you break that car before we go to Florida in February." That's all I cared about. He's like, he wants to go to Florida, go to Sick Week.
That's so
we're going to drive my 1,500 horsepower GTO all the way to Florida with winter tires and mud flaps on it.
Again.
And now because of you, I got some radials coming. They might be Hoosiers. They might be the exact ones you were running. So I spent the last 2 days measuring my chassis, and it was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you. How much rear end travel do you have in that car?
Yeah, the shocks we run in the rear is it's a bolt-on stock location, you know, AFCO that fits an F body, and it's a 7-inch travel. I think at ride height, you know, because obviously this is not a street car, and I don't know that it, you know, if it were your car, you'd have to probably change the setup, but at ride height, I have about 1 inch of compression left. So it separates going down the track. You know, the way the F body suspension is if it's set up to separate, it's going to separate and just continue separating until it finds the top, if you got enough power into it. So it separates about a full 6 inches, you know, from where from ride height to what it's actually going down the track, you know, about the point it reaches the top of first gear, it's at full separation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's-
quite a picture with you and Garrett, where your car is like stink bug and his is even though his is radial too, but yeah, that's a pretty cool picture, seeing how much separation you have there.
So can you go into a little more detail on the transition from a bias ply slick to a radial? Because Rich, he's been bit here, and I've been thinking the same thing now that and I guess the main difference is I run a diaphragm style clutch, but I have a digital clutch control device that I developed. And interestingly enough, when Rich and I, because we actually talk more than just this podcast, if you can imagine that. But when we compare data logs and stuff, especially on first gear, they actually don't look that different. The way that our slip and the little bit of flare on the hit and everything, it's fairly similar.
Yeah.
And now that I have that under control, because that's always been a challenge with the diaphragm clutch is the launch. But boy, I'm feeling more confident about running a radial. But I've heard some really ugly things about it, and I'm hoping you can enlighten us, because I've heard it's really hard on parts. You know, if you don't have stuff right and all that, and the track's got to be like on the money for those to work right with a stick. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, if you have something that's, you know, milder in terms of power, then you would run a milder clutch, you know, in terms of diaphragm, street style stuff. So you might get by with a radial just because your clutch don't have to be crazy aggressive to handle your power. And it comes back to what I said a minute ago. You know, we're trying to leave the line at 800 or 900 horsepower and, you know, feed in up to 2,000 horsepower just in a second and a half. So, you know, the adjustable clutch makes that possible. It makes the radials possible, and you know, your bang shift Billy device, you know, if you can get similar results, you know, as far as clutch slip as Rich is getting, and then still control it, you know, once it goes down the track, if it's able to couple up, you know, I would think the radial would work for you, you know, just fine. My background in racing, even though we have TIC and we've done, you know, the manual transmissions for a long time, mostly I've had like small tire, you know, automatic, like ultra street type cars or X275 type stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I've been running radials since, you know, 2005 or something, we'll say. And it's just this is what I knew. And then when we got this grubworm car, it was a car that we had built for a customer as a street car, and he, you know, drove it and enjoyed it for a couple of years, and he decided, you know, he's ready to sell it. So we bought it, and I wanted to drag race it. He didn't really drag race it, or, you know, it's a street car, just roll racing fun, you know, on the street kind of stuff. So we put bias ply tires on it just because that's what everybody does with a stick car. You know, that's you buy, even if you look in the, you know, the catalog at tires, if you look at the radials, it'll say right on it, not recommended for stick shift applications. So we put, you know, bias ply slicks, 2810 5s or whatever, stiff wall, Mickey Thompson's on it. And I just never could really make it work good. I mean, we got it to 60 foot, you know, like high 120, low 130s, you know, it'd turn the tire a few rounds, and, you know, the car goes down the track looking like Garrett's car you said in the picture, you know, that you was just talking about, where it's all squatted out in the back, and, you know, the front travel's all extended out, and car was just, I mean, it got fast enough. It was scary. Like it, you know, we got up to, I think we went 8.0 at 180 with the bias ply slick on the car. And it was hard to drive. I mean, it was scary in the quarter mile at 180. And the next race I put, you know, I was like, you know, I know all this about radials. I know how to make suspension work for radials. You know, I realize it's a stick car, but I just, you know, I had to try it. And at the time, you know, a couple of other guys were running radials. Yandro with the Minion, he was running radials, and we were seeing him, and, you know, he was coming to some of our local events and, you know, just kicking butt. So we decided, let's just put the radials on the car. And the very next race, you know, of course, we made a few suspension changes, some stuff that, you know, we knew should work with radials. And the car went right out there and it ran 780s. you know, and it was like it was Streetcar Takeover Atlanta, like in maybe 2018. And it never spun. We made every pass like a bracket car. And I mean, it was amazing. You know, it's like, why didn't we do this, you know, from day one? But yeah, the radial, it just works. And unless, you know, we're going to a no prep race, which is not something that we're probably ever going to do with this car, but if there's any prep, I'm going to be running a radial. You know, I wouldn't go back to a bi-supply if somebody sponsored me bi-supply tires for life. You know, it's just
So you
awful.
picked up 2/10 going from a bias ply to a radial.
Yeah, and I mean the car was a lot more stable too. So I mean it's a lot more comfortable to drive.
So is it safe to
that-
say you saw was the increase in the 60-foot dropping, or was it all the incrementals?
I mean it was probably across the board. I mean the 60-foot was a lot better, but more than better, it was just a lot more consistent. You know, at that point in time, I don't think we really went extremely faster. And we may have changed a couple other things between those two events, but that was literally back-to-back events. We ran the bias at Charlotte Street Car Takeover to the 8.0s, and then we went to Atlanta on a radial and ran set, you know, I think maybe high 780s, so a little more than the 10th game. But
the funny part is, and probably the best video I saw after you broke the record was where somebody overlaid you whistling going down the track. I'm thinking, because it did. I don't know how many times I watched that in-car video, and then the overlay of RPM boost, shocks, all that stuff. But it looks amazingly smooth.
Super
Yeah.
calm and
Yeah.
collected. Yeah.
yeah, it's not a hard car to drive. You know, there's more to that whistling song, you know, video than maybe you realize. But we're from Mount Airy, and Mount Airy's Mayberry. So
Oh, yeah.
the tune was the Andy Griffith song.
Yeah.
Because Andy Griffith was from Mount Airy. He's originally from our hometown, and that whole show
Nice.
was supposedly based on our town. So they thought it'd be funny if I was going down the track whistling the theme to the Andy Griffith show.
Running 661 at 216 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
it was pretty awesome. I laughed. I thought that was hilarious.
You know what the problem is, Rich? My bank account's scared now because I'm gonna have to order some radials since you ordered them.
Mine are on the way. Yeah.
Just send me the part number, please.
And you typically run like a Mickey Thompson bracket. Which radial do you normally run?
Yeah, we had run the bracket radial, you know, exclusively until we switched to the Hoosier, and that was just purely out of what was available. We'd never run, you know, a lot of guys run the Mickey Thompson Pro radial, which is a little stiffer sidewall. I mean, it's probably the best tire for just really exceptional prep. But we'd run the bracket radial, and it's just all around good everywhere. Like I said a minute ago, you know, we run if there's any prep, we're going to run a radial, and it's just been great. But it got to the point where, you know, the tires that we had on the car coming into the back stretch of the season, they had enough passes on them that I was ready to take them off, and just couldn't find any Mickey Thompsons. I had some ordered for a couple of months. They just weren't coming in. So we seen that which I didn't even know that a DR2 Hoosier was a thing. I didn't know that existed, and seen them on Summit's site, you know, just searching for, you know, options or if they had anything. And so we bought a set and tried them, and that's what we ran at Florida. And I mean, they did great.
So it's
Well,
a VR2.
A
Yeah,
DR2, like
Oh,
drag
DR2.
radial 2.
no, Bill, they're VR2s. Yeah,
I'm
you order.
I'm taking notes.
You get
right
the
now.
VR2s. I'll get the DR2s, and we'll
Thanks,
see
Rich.
what happens.
Thanks. Thanks, buddy.
Well, thanks to Jonathan, they're probably sold out everywhere now. So there was
Man.
probably a major run on those tires after that bus.
Yeah. So speaking of supply chain issues, as far as TIC, what like, do you have parts or materials that you're having trouble getting also for manufacturing stuff? Because you guys, and talk about some of the parts you guys make, like some stuff in house. I have one of your shift forks now, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And you have that awesome front cover with the spray bar. But
Both of us run that. Yep.
yeah. That was your
Yeah.
fault too, Rich. You got that first.
Well, I think we'll both be ordering some shifters. That before you start talking about your business, the shifter that you run in your car, that's your shifter. Is it a mid plate or is it the?
Aft mount.
Yeah, the shifter in my car is the F body style,
Hmm.
because our transmission is a car is an F body. So the transmission case is, it's still old T56 stuff. We're running the G-Force T56 gears, not the Magnum stuff like you guys.
Mm.
But it's a F body style shifter. We
So is
sell
that the
the
4-bolt or 6-bolt one?
It's a 4-bolt.
Okay.
It's a specific shifter to fit, the 93 to 02 Camaro style case. Standard Magnum would have the 6-bolt shifter, and then of course we sell a relocation shifter, which would go on that panel, the little 4-bolt plate that's
Yep.
on the main case.
Mm-hmm.
We sell a shifter for that too. If your application calls for a shifter to be that far forward. We don't. Actually, I think we do. We just recently released one for the XL, which is a little different, and even the TKX.
So the guts of those shifters are pretty much the same. The mounting plate's a little different, but the guts of it is the same.
Yeah, the standard Magnum and the F style that I run are the same, and then we've kind of changed it up a little bit on the newer designs that we've just recently came out with, which we're also about to release one for the Corvettes, which fits all C5,
Nice.
6, and 7. But it uses a little bit different design of a spring. The detent setup, or just the spring that centers it's a little different. So it's a little more compact, a little easier to make, and probably should be more durable, I would say too.
Are you looking to sponsor any Fords to run that shifter?
Yeah, we can help you out if that's what you're hinting at.
We'll talk.
Yeah, I recently I have a stock T56 Magnum, and then I have my G-Force, and I'm just going through it before Florida, and I just threw the stock shifter back on. I thought it was broke.
Yeah.
Currently I'm running an American Powertrain White Lightning shifter,
yeah.
which is a shorter throw, but it's got sealing issues, and but I was amazed at how big that throw is on a stock Magnum shifter. And then you watch your video and you're like, beep, beep, it's just like nice and tight. So yeah, you'll be getting a call from both of us, I'm thinking. So yeah, I was on your website for a while. I was amazed at, camshaft combinations that you guys sell. You want to talk a little bit about those too?
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of cam packages. We have our own grinds of cams, our own part number or line of cams that, rank is basically LS based stuff, and new LT. We do have some cams for the old LT, which is the small block Chevy style, like we've ran. But yeah, I don't even know how many cams we offer, but everything from pretty much every application engine wise, from the 5.3 4853 LS1 all the way up through LS7 stuff, and then the new LT stuff. Couple 3 levels of NA cams. We got boosted cams, turbo cams, stroker motor cams. All that kind of stuff is just on our shelf.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you got like 4 pages of cams. I was looking. I couldn't find the Pontiac ones, but I was looking.
They're on page 9 and 10.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So how many employees you guys have at Tick?
It hovers around 20. I'm not sure right now. We're probably 19 or 20.
Nice. And I think you said you guys have been in business almost 20 years now, since 03. So yeah, that's cool. And like, what would you say your best selling products are, or top selling products?
Believe it or not, as far as what we manufacture, it's probably our air to water intercoolers.
Really?
We do a ton of air to water intercoolers for like the Holly High Ram, and of course we have a style for a Texas feed intake that they released not too long ago. So we sell a ton of those, but other than that, it would be back to our manual tranny stuff. So our shifters, especially the F body style and the standard Magnum, and then our clutch hydraulics is really what got us into the machining side of the business. Because we've been in business a long time, but we didn't start out as a machine shop or manufacturing parts. We started out as just a garage that turned wrenches. We built cars. That evolved to the point where we were doing enough performance work that we needed to start tuning cars. So then at that point, I became a tuner. That was kind of my job, was dyno tuning cars. But the clutch hydraulics thing was something that we came out with before we had a machine shop, and we had other machine shops and other companies that kind of made the parts that were custom to our kits for us. And we packaged kits, starting out with an F body clutch master cylinder kit. Then we did the C5 Corvette, I think, then a kit for a GTO.
No, sorry to interrupt you, but you're talking about just the master, and they're adjustable, right? I think I've read about them.
Yeah, it's a kit that basically adapted a Tilton cylinder to fit, certain, stock applications. So like I said, a fourth gen F body, or it would fit third gen and fourth gen technically, I guess. But we did the F body, we did the C5, then we did a GTO. And, the kit was using the Tilton cylinder, or still does use the Tilton cylinder, but it was a custom machined adapter bracket, a custom machined piece of hex for the rod, depending on the length of the rod. We had custom heim joints made to fit the stock pedals, things like that. And those were really, one of the things we did as a turning point, for where the business kind of really took off, was with the clutch hydraulic stuff. And at the kind of at the same point, we started doing the transmission builds more. Instead of just a local level, we started doing a mail order, so the business kind of really took off at that point. And the hydraulic stuff it was difficult to deal with outside companies, and have predictable lead times. And, our products would be back ordered because we'd be waiting on a machine shop to finish the fittings or the bracket or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's what got us into machining in the first place. And we've been doing our own products in-house for, I would say, maybe 6 years now. That's how new that is. We kind of phased out the installation side of the business, little by little. Every time we'd add a machine, it's kind of like we'd take another lift down, and a technician would find a different job. I mean, we didn't have to let anybody go, thankfully, but it's like as we grew the machine shop, the installation side, just went away little by little. We sold the dyno a couple of years ago. So I do tuning just for, a couple of our better customers or close friend type customers, just track tuning type stuff. We don't really offer, those kind of services anymore.
Sure. So you have all these machines. When are you going to start making clutch discs?
Well, it would be nice if we
clutches.
could do that.
Clutches, yeah.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about it. I mean, on the street side of things, we sell a ton of Monster clutches. I mean, Monster, it's like a big deal. We're one of their biggest, if not the biggest dealer for their product.
Nice.
And, it's just, I'm sure there's the potential to make our own clutch kits and sell a ton of them, but we've got good margins with a couple of the companies we use. So, really just trying not to step on their toes. And, it's the adjustable side of things, with the clutches like we race. I mean, that's a pretty small market. So
yeah,
sure.
maybe one of these days, but not anytime soon.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Actually, I know that, we had Mark on here before you, Mark Shiflett from G-Force, and he had nothing but good things to say about dealing with tip performance, and how he was happy that you guys have a partnership. And I know, like, people are ordering their G-Force transmission, it's like, do you want a tick front plate? Because they work really well. So
Really,
yeah, it's I think it's important nowadays. well, I think it's always been important, but even more so nowadays, to make sure you're, working with your suppliers and treating everybody good, including, fellow businesses that you deal with. So, yeah, like I said, Mark had nothing but good things to say.
Oh yeah, Mark's been a great guy to work with. Like I said, we're running the G-Force stuff, even their older stuff, and it's been awesome. What few little parts we have heard or customers, I mean, they've been super helpful, easy to deal with, and they use our billet plate. We use mostly their gears. I mean, we do some transmissions with PPG gears.
Mhm.
Also a great product, but it's just so easy to deal with G-Force. That's why I like them.
Yeah, it's funny with Mark. Some days I'll if I call him up to need a part, I swear the doorbell's ringing, and I'm in Canada. And I'm like, how the hell did he get the parts to me so fast?
Yeah.
But the previous company didn't have the same reputation. So yeah, Mark is fantastic. Like, yeah, he bends over backwards for us. He's been great. So.
Yeah, for sure. I'm on the subscription plan for the input shafts, as a matter of fact, right now.
Just one a month.
Just right.
One a month. Yeah.
You have any? You got any top secret parts in the works you want to tell us about? Maybe we'll wait till we're offline.
I mean, I don't know that we got anything super top secret coming out. Like I said, we've got our Corvette shifters that should be releasing actually just any day now. If they haven't already. I'm even almost out of the loop on some of that kind of stuff. I mean, we have a guy. I don't run the machine shop side of the business even really. A guy that's been a long time employee, Matt Goins, he handles all that. I kind of bounce ideas off of him, and some of the products are my ideas, some of them are his idea. Some of them are customers' idea that there's just a need for. But new stuff coming out. The only thing I'm really aware of, I mean, I know we just did the drivetrain couplers for Corvettes, so they have the torque tube.
Yep.
So we're doing like polyurethane and billet aluminum couplers for the drive shaft, and we're also about to, or we're working on a billet front plate for the Corvette guys. So that's the next thing to come out, hopefully,
with a spray bar and all that, I would imagine.
Yeah. What we're going to actually try to do with that one, and it might get incorporated into our other plates too. I hope you don't get mad that that I'm telling you guys this, but how some of those transmissions, the TR6060s, have a mechanical pump. There's a mechanical pump that circulates fluid through a cooler. We've done a little bit of testing with that, and we're probably going to make that front plate have the ability to accept that. Or there would be a block off plate if you just want to use the electric pump like we have been.
Yeah.
But it looks like that mechanical pump's pretty powerful, and we may try to even make our own pump, or our pump like a pump insert, because some of the transmissions, like from a 5th gen, for example, they have a pump, but their front plate and bell housings and all, it's an integrated piece. So we're looking at maybe upgrading that pump and then having all of our billet plates accept that pump as well. So, because we're looking at the road race guys that are using it for reasons more than just, adding lubrication to those gears, for 6, 7, 8 seconds down the drag strip. They need it to run continuously for, a 30-minute session or whatever they might be on the track.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working toward, and if you could eliminate the electric pump and use a mechanical pump, it simplifies it for the guy that's installing it into their car. There's no wiring, there's no figuring out how to mount a pump. So we're thinking that might be a good way, and you just plumb that pump back into the spray bar, instead of it just returning into the top of the case like it does, an OEM application. The mechanical pump would still feed the spray bar. So
yeah, I don't even turn my electric pump on until 2,500 RPM. So it's usually, and I mean, the thing cruises at 1,700 at 80 miles an hour. So it's not very often on the street on 2,500 RPM. Not very often.
Same boat. Mine's on at 3,500, and that would be irresponsible for it to ever come on the street.
Okay, we should probably ask you some more specific questions just about stick car racing. Um, actually, I would say stick car racing's really taken off, though. Hey, like, have you noticed? Well, I mean, that top 10 list. What is it? You're the fastest, and then the number 10 is like 7:35 or something crazy.
Yeah, I seen that the other day. I think Yandro, the minion, maybe shared
Yeah,
or made a post about it, about being slow or whatever, because he's gotten bumped off of that list. He's been out of the game for a couple of years, and looks like he's about ready to get back into it. But yeah, it's pretty wild, that the speeds that guys are going. And of course, at Florida Grannis, he bettered his, he set his personal best and got into the 660s as well. So I mean, he's right there. I mean, he beat us in the finals. So we've got competition at that, and there's other cars that are going to be super fast that I think haven't really showed their full potential yet. One of them being the Speed Factory Honda. That guy, he's been like 7.0s with like a wastegate issue. He
Wow.
ran to like the about 500 feet into the pass and ripped a wastegate diaphragm or a blow off valve diaphragm or something. Anyway, boost fell way off, and he still ran a 704 at like 190, which was probably 20 plus mile per hour off of what it actually would have ran.
Wow.
jeez.
Wow.
There's
Huh.
some fast stuff coming out.
Yeah. Hey, before I forget, uh, parachute flying off. How was that?
It was scary.
Did you see it? Did you have a rearview mirror? You probably do. Hey, see.
Oh no, there's no mirrors. That's extra weight we don't need.
Yeah. If they're behind you, they're losing.
Yeah. Yeah, the parachute, I mean there's nothing wrong with the parachute itself. We'll say that first, because people think, oh, parachute failed, and that's not what happened. What happened is, where we push the car with a golf cart, there's a push pin that we leave in the back of the car. Just kind of it rides in the parachute mount, and we never take it out. It's just if you leave it there, you don't ever lose it. And somehow the loop of the parachute that the bolt, that's holding it to the car would pass through also got under or around that pin. So when the chute deployed, it yanked against that pin before it yanked against the actual bolt that it should be,
Yep.
pulling against. And it caused it to rip the metal where that mount was fabricated, and then that sharp edge just sliced it right in two.
Mm.
I don't know how it's possible that it could have even gotten the way it did, because I mean we've made hundreds of passes, I guess, over the course of the last 4 years with that setup the way it was, and then somehow it perfect scenario, the thing got wrapped around that pin, and as soon as it pulled, I mean I felt the chute hit, and it made a loud pop, and it's just no brakes. So
Wow.
I-
What are you running for brakes on that thing?
we got the TBM brakes on it.
Nice. You like those? Heard really good things about them.
Yeah, we had run the aerospace brakes on this car all up until this year, and we redone all the suspension, the rear end, all the front suspension, everything over the this previous winter. So that's when we changed to the TBM, and I mean the aerospace brakes were fine, I guess. They did good, and they were on another car I used to own before they even got put on this car. So we had great service from them.
Yeah.
But the TBM brakes were lighter. They spin easier. There's less drag or no drag, they say. I mean, it's one of their points. To
Yeah.
market those brakes, and I mean it's true. I mean they're super nice. High quality brakes compared to what else is out there. It seems like, and
Yeah.
I just like Doug Cook, and Motion, and their whole business plan or mentality. I just want to support them. So that's why we went to the TBMs.
Nice. Nice.
well, you proved they work.
Yeah, we
Must have
lost
been
our,
smoking.
yeah, they were definitely hot. We lost our chute at like a 208 mile an hour pass, and you don't you don't stab the brakes right off the bat either. So I mean,
No.
we lost some track, slow down time just waiting on the chute. But that track, Gainesville had a super long shutdown. I mean, we'd have been in trouble if we'd have been on a lot of other tracks.
Yeah.
But they had enough shutdown. We got stopped good. The rotors, when they get super hot, I don't know how much they grow because there's a ton of clearance. If you just with everything installed on the car and everything's cool, but those rotors will grow like in diameter to the point that they start touching the inside of the caliper, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was touching hardcore, when we had to stop from that speed. I mean, we felt them touch a little bit, like you could see just a little indication on the rotor, because the rotor is not just a round rotor, I'm not sure how you describe it. It's wavy.
Travis will probably post a picture, but I'm familiar with them too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like the high points of the rotor were digging into like the base or the inside of the caliper. So, I mean, it was pretty wild. It was pretty scary, but I mean, the car got slowed down just fine.
Nice. So safe to say those brakes and the rotors went nuclear.
Yeah,
that's the emergency brake portion of them. Once you get them that hot, they start grabbing the steel on the rotor to slow you down.
All on their own.
All on their own, yeah.
They got so hot that it looked like it had a lot of brake pad material, like just kind of welded itself to the rotor. They looked really rough. Like if you'd ran metal on metal.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the next pass, I mean, we didn't have a choice to run. I mean, the brakes felt good and they worked good, and we borrowed a parachute, and whatever it had deposited from the brake pad on the rotor, it must have scrubbed off on the next pass. So, I mean, they're just as good as they ever were now. So,
nice.
That's impressive.
That's impressive. That's some destructive testing right there. That's good. So we have a few questions from folks from Stick Shift Nation. You got a few minutes to run through those?
Yeah.
All right. I'll take the first one, Rich. Would spread port heads hold an exhaust gasket better than your current heads?
So I was reading comments on a YouTube video the other day. I think it might have been our, the Tick YouTube page. We posted a video explaining our header flanges that we just made. We made some really thick header flanges because we've had a lot of trouble with the header flanges warping. Went to like a stall pattern this year with an adapter plate because our head's just a conventional small block Chevy head.
Right.
And so somebody asked the same question, and I didn't even really know what a spread port head was. I mean, other than this car, I'm an LS guy. With Tick Performance is a shop that specialized in LS performance, and kind of getting off topic, but this car not being an LS is kind of why I like it so good. We built it for a customer because we're a late model GM shop, but it was not an LS, and it did really well. So that's kind of why I like it. But some of my small block Chevy knowledge is limited because I just haven't done much of that. So I had to look up what a spread port head was. And, what I found out was that they spaced the two middle ports apart about a half an inch more than they are. And to answer that question, yes, that probably would have helped or could have helped. But, part of the problem with the small block Chevy design is just you've got those two exhaust ports in the middle side by side. So the head heats up less evenly, I guess you'd say, compared to something with a symmetrical port like an LS or a small block Ford. So maybe it would have helped, but being as we don't run any water, kind of the idea with the spread port, I think, and moving those ports apart a half an inch was to get some water jacket, to kind of get some water between those ports or in a different place. And since we don't run water, I don't know how much it would have helped. Might would help in terms of gasket sealing ability or gasket design, but ultimately I doubt it would make very much difference without a water cooled head.
Yeah, Pontiacs are the same.
Yeah.
Two center exhaust ports, and I'm continually torquing that bolt too.
Yeah.
Because it gets pretty hot.
Yeah. Rich, you want to take the next one?
Sure. Where did the name grub worm come from?
the guy that we built the car for, like I've said a couple of times now, we built this car for a customer, and his name was Randy Grubbs, or might have been Randy Grubb. I'm not sure if it has an S on the end or not, but anyway, I like the car. It came up for sale. We ended up being able to get the car. And one of the guys at the shop, I wanted to name the car because I think it's cool that the old stick shift, gear jammer type cars, they all had names. They put names on the side of the car, the door, whatever, like from way back when in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And, I thought I want to name my car and, kind of make it look like those old school cars, even though it's not an old school car. And one of the guys was like, you should name it the Grub Worm. You name it after Randy. He owned it. Everybody will know that. They'll remember the car. It's kind of like my dad's story, about Tick. It's like everybody will know it was Randy Grubb's car if you name it the Grub Worm. And not knocking Randy, but the car kind of had the reputation, in our area of not being very fast. It was
solve that problem.
Yeah, well, it was like motivation for me, once I bought it, because he raced it on the street, if you want to call it that, roll racing, whatever.
Mexico.
Yeah, he went to Mexico a lot, and apparently he got outrun a lot, and by cars that made a good bit less power. And I don't know if it was just the lagginess of the turbo setup it had at the time, or maybe it was driver. I don't know, but a lot of people ragged on the car because they thought it was slow. And I thought, well, we'll name it Grub Worm and we'll show them, that what this car is really capable of. And, that's how it went.
Nice.
Mission accomplished.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So we got another question here. My LS pilot bearing is slightly loose. I've heard people use a knurled pilot bearing or Loctite to take up the slack. What do you recommend?
Oh, well, if it was loose, I would probably measure the bearing and see if the problem was the crank or the bearing. If it were a small bearing, I may look, to a different brand first, and hopefully find one that's sized right. But if the crankshaft's bore is, larger than it should be,
Wallered out.
yeah, if there's could be, if it spun one in it at some point in its life or whatever, and the hole's larger than it should be. I guess knurling could be a possibility. If it's close to a press fit, green Loctite will, hold more than, you'd think. And I've seen that work, but I run bushings. I don't run a bearing. And if you run a bushing and it's not pressing in tight enough or it doesn't have a press fit, you could always just turn some off the outside and machine a sleeve, to take up, to give it a press fit. In other words, that's probably what I would do.
Yep. All right.
It's interesting. Bill and I have the debate on bushings or bearings all the time. How come bushing? How come not bearing for you?
Well, a bearing would obviously be better, and we may make the switch back to a bearing because one of the things that happened to us in Florida was our pilot bushing got trashed, and we had to drop the transmission after the 661 pass that night. We knew it was hurt going into that final round of that shootout. We ran it anyway, but the bushing gets all like micro welded to the input shaft, and then it just chews it out. It destroys it. But the main reason behind running a bushing is it never hurts the input shaft. You can take some emery cloth and, knock off whatever, might have bonded itself to the shaft if you do have a failure. And in our car, in our application, we're taking the transmission out anyway, multiple times a year. So knocking another pilot bushing in is not a big deal. With the bearing, the bearing might last multiple seasons. I don't know. But when the bearing does fail, then you're going to destroy the tip of your input shaft most likely. And we had that happen in our car. We was actually at a race, went to the U.S. Street Nationals a couple of years ago. And at the time we were running bearings, factory GM bearing. And we had the bearing fail, and the input shaft could move around enough at that point where it was no longer supported, that it actually broke the slave cylinder. At the time we were using a factory like LS F body slave cylinder, and the diameter of the shaft was so close to the bore of that slave that it broke the slave, like the guide tube part of the slave.
Oh, I've done that a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think I broke 3 of them at drag week one year.
well, yeah, that the bearing, fell in that way. It's like the bush, and it'll gradually wear out unless something bad happens, and you just maintain it. Whereas the bearing, it's kind of like it's good until the day it ain't, and then it destroys everything.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I've always ran bearings. I haven't had any issues, but I know that Bill struggled for quite a while. I know he's made the shift recently, and the last outing was good. Anyways, hey Bill.
Yeah, so I for a lot of years, well, I tried a bearing, needle bearing, and ended up, this was when I had a TKO in the car with a NA motor, and ended up trashing the input shaft. So I went to bushing for years, like 5 years probably. And the factory, or the off the shelf bushing that you could get, they're relatively soft. And I had put one in, drove the car to the track, made 3 hits, and drove it home and pulled it out, and it had wrecked the bushing. And I was just like, God, this just can't be. And so I have a buddy of mine, he's a machinist, and I talked to him, and we ended up machining a couple of bushings out of a harder bronze. Now, it wasn't the oil light type stuff, so it's a fine line. If it doesn't have some lubricity built into that metal,
Yeah.
it did work a lot better. Like, it lasted a lot longer, but it would get noisy because it really didn't have the oil impregnation. So then, after talking to another friend who runs, I don't know, how much power is Pat making? 3,000, Pat Miker?
Yeah, he's 2,500, 3,000 horse.
Yeah.
And a
And he's got
67 Chevelle.
Yeah, and he's got a Lenco in it, but he said he's using like an industrial ball bearing, like a sealed ball bearing. And I checked with the bearing supply house here, and they had one that perfect ID and OD, and I tapped it in there, and I did race week with it, and I've done a couple of events, and every time I pull it out, I'm expecting terrible things, and it's in perfect shape. So
Yeah.
I think I'm in good shape now, but
Yeah,
it's taken a bit to get there.
The sealed ball bearing is definitely the way if you can make that work, because like the late model GM stuff, they had a sealed ball bearing that fits in the rearmost pocket of the crank, like where the converter would pilot itself if it had an automatic tranny.
Yeah.
And those seem to hold up great, but those needle style roller bearings, like the old small block Chevy and the early LS stuff had, is terrible.
Those terrify me because it's just,
Yeah.
you're right. Anything goes wrong, your input shaft is wrecked.
Yeah.
So
Okay, another question from the interweb. So thoughts on starting line ratio, and how does ideal starting line ratio change as power increases?
Well, I don't change the start line ratio because I've got one option with those, with the G-force gear set.
Yeah.
So it is what it is, but PPG has other gear options, and we ran other, like a taller gear in a couple of our fast cars, like Joel Steele's car. It had a 258 first gear, I think, compared to our 271. So at our power level, I think we'd be better if we had a taller first gear, to kind of get that start line ratio down. But we run what we run. Our backup parts are what we run. It'd be a huge investment to change. So
what rear gear are you running in, Grubworm?
it's a 340.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. I think you answered the last question we had, was about the shifts for the Holly and how you did that. So, Rich, should we jump to the TKO round?
We got another important question first.
Oh, what is it?
World Cup.
Oh, yep.
World Cup's coming up. You're going. That's a little closer to you too, right?
Yeah, we're probably 5.5 hours from where World Cup happens. So.
And you're going?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's that's like the Super Bowl of what we do, I guess. You know, that's our favorite event. You know, the weather's always uh, just awesome, if not too cold. You know, it borderlines on, you know, just being too cold to really get a hold of the track. But yeah, we'll definitely be there. You know, they do a 25 car, you know, ET minimum required deal, so it's always the fastest guys, you know, best race in my opinion.
So are you gonna have to do anything with your clutch before you go, or do you have a couple of them? Like you're obviously not running the billet one. You'll probably stick with what you know.
Yeah, we'll probably stick with what we know. The clutch we have in the car is an 8-inch twin, and the billet is also an 8-inch twin.
Hmm.
And what Rob is trying to get me to do is to take those discs and put in with the billet. I didn't want to do that for Florida because I just didn't want to show up to Florida totally, you know, untested with that combination. But at this point, I might go ahead and try that for World Cup. I mean, the clutch went away. Like as we were running at Florida, the clutch kind of went away. And in our final rounds, we should have been, well, went a 673 in the semis, which was fast, but our 60-foot kind of fell off. And then the 60-foot was off even more against Joel in the final, even though that we turned the car up. I just, with the 6 lever, you know, with the billet, is probably a lot more stable. I mean, who knows what kind of flex and, you know, crazy stuff is going on with that stamp steel pressure
Oh
plate.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of gotten like the clutch is still holding out the back, and we still got our mile per hour, and you know, it's not like we're slipping it or hurting it, but it's just, it seems to have become inconsistent. And Rob thinks that the billet would, you know, be more consistent. I mean, he's really concerned, you know, just from a safety standpoint, you know, when's this thing going to let go? So we're probably going to put the billet in with the old ones clutches, since we can't get the kind of clutch that we're wanting to get. There's just, we had some stuff to try, like I said earlier, but it was, the material is super soft, according to Rob, and they were chunking like material off of the back. And so we were, you know, just scared to run that. But I really didn't think about putting the other discs in with the billet clutch. He's, you know, it just never dawned on me that, hey, they're both 8-inch, they both work. But that's
Yeah,
what we're going to do.
And I'll be honest, I've been struggling getting discs for, I have a twin disc 10.5, and I actually had to buy Rich's because he doesn't run that hammer of a clutch anymore. But I couldn't get, because there's different formulas of that. Was it the 5135 disc material? There's actually sub parts or formulas for it, and some are softer and they're way more aggressive, like way grabbier.
Yeah.
And like the ones that I'm running and the pair that I bought from Rich, it's a lot harder. I guess the Rockwell's harder, and they last a long time, and they slip. They're not quite as aggressive, and they work really, really well for my scenario with the clutch controller. And I was able to get some other ones that I thought were it, but they're the softer ones, and I'm not even going to put them in because they don't work as well for me, and they don't last. Like I'll wear them out after like a race week or a Midwest Drags or something. They're just wasted.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear you. It's crazy, the supply chain stuff. So
Yeah.
So
TKO round so we can
Okay.
let them go.
all right,
Skids
so
it.
we have a TKO round with 5 questions. You want to start it, Rich?
Sure. First car you owned or modified?
Well, I mean, I had an S10 in high school, which I guess I modified to some degree, but I mean, it was a 4-wheel drive S10. But the first car that I actually like went to the track and, you know, really tried to modify and go fast was a 99 Trans Am that I have.
Ooh,
And I
nice.
still have. I mean, I bought that car probably a year before we opened Tick. And
Nice.
it was actually the first thing we ever put on the lift that, you know, we bought for Tick, you know, before my dad opened the doors to, you know, like start doing business. We put my Trans Am on there, and we did like a cam and head package and stuff. It's still the car. I still have the car. It's at Rock Solid Motorsports right now, getting a bunch of chassis work done. The turbo stuff. I've been waiting on some parts so I can get down to those guys to, you know, do the turbo plumbing, headers, and all that. But it's going to be a billet block, billet head, 400 or 500 bore space, small block Chevy. So it's going to come out and wreck
some
the stick
feelings.
shift class, I guess.
Nice.
But that's my first car that I really, did a lot as far as modifying.
That's awesome. All right, second gear. What, in your opinion, has been the biggest technology change to move our sport forward?
Man, I don't know. I mean, cars going fast now, I think probably have, a lot to just tire technology and prep, in comparison to years ago. I mean, prep and tires have came a long way, and then it's probably just the EFI systems and all the data that you can, all the sensors and everything that you can monitor now, to make, educated adjustments more so than just guessing at stuff. And some of that technology's probably been around for a long time, but I think people have just, they're just learning more. There's more people doing it. You see more and more experience and more knowledge out there, more access to knowledge, with social media and just everything. But single thing I would say is probably the tires, technology and tires and prep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that information piece is key. I know watching your the data on your paths, I'm like, okay, yeah, I have a rear shock sensor that I haven't installed yet, but it's going on now. Okay, next question. So what is your day job at Tick?
Well, I own Tick now. My dad, he retired. It's been mine for, I guess, the last 5 or 6 years. Basically, the point where we started really pushing the machine work is, when I took ownership of the company. Mostly, I just bounce around. Mostly I work on my race car, to be honest. I do engines, which was something, engine assembly as a hobby of mine. I did it on the side, at my house for the last few years, but kind of got more of that going on than, I wanted to do on the side. So we recently moved all that stuff back to Tick. So I do a lot of engine assembly. Other than that, I'll do tech calls or, just whatever, helping out.
Answering guys on Messenger.
Yeah, I mean, I don't work in the machine shop side of it. I used to, when we first started doing transmissions, that was my thing. I did the transmissions, just by myself. I did transmission rebuilds for probably 3 or 4 years before we moved back to Mount Airy to, our current location. And then when we moved to add to the old, Tick history or whatever, we started our business in Mount Airy and we worked there for 4 years. Then we moved to Mooresville and we actually teamed up with another company that did tuning. So we were like a mechanic, we were the wrench and they were the tuner, and we split all the bills, rent for the building and all that kind of stuff. But then we decided to move back to Mount Airy when, we moved to Mooresville, which was about 80 miles away. So we moved back to, our hometown. And that's the point where I hired a guy, trained a guy to start doing the transmission rebuilds. And that's when I started doing the tuning. So I'm probably getting off so far off course. I think I've lost track of the question now, but what was the question?
Oh, your day job. So yeah, you answered it.
Yeah, so I did transmissions, then I did the tuning. We kind of phased all that out. So now it's just, I'll sit on Facebook all day and, stir the pot and work on my race car once in a while.
I have seen you stir the pot quite a bit. I love it.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
And I think there was some comment about you maybe hurting some feelings on this podcast tonight. So
Oh,
I like that.
yeah.
So let's slide into fourth gear. What influences you to build your car or cars?
Well, I mean, a lot of the motivation to build the car that we're racing and do what we're doing is just because the manual transmission side of our business is a huge part of our business, and we want to showcase, what we're capable of, with those transmissions. And but otherwise, I mean, I like stick shift racing. I like racing in general, but it's not too hard to motivate me to to want to work on a race car and go race it.
So safe to say you don't like a purse to put in your back seat with an automatic, right?
No.
Perfect.
There's a bit of history there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, this is the tough question now. What, in your opinion, is the secrets to stick shift racing? What would be the biggest improvement? Clutch management?
I would say so. You know, whether it be an adjustable clutch like we run or you run, or like a product like Bill offers to, you know, to control the clutch electronically with the hydraulics, you know, the life of your entire drivetrain, and, you know, having any level of success really, if you start making serious power, is controlling the clutch for, you know, 100%.
Nice, nice. So let's get crazy and throw it into double overdrive with the T56 question. So number 6, and this kind of is maybe the same question because you just sort of answered it, but what advice would you give to someone getting into this sport?
As in stick shift racing?
Yeah. Well, I mean, drag racing, but I mean, if you're going to be cool, then yeah, you're going to do stick shift racing.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, as far as advice goes, I mean, I think this
Maybe
kind of
buy
comes.
everything in the tick catalog as a start.
Yes, tickperformance.com, everything you need. Please buy it there. But no, it's I would say in racing, anything in general, the best advice that I would give based off of our, you know, experience as being a shop that did installs and did tuning is just don't try to race outside of your means. You know, like
Mm,
set goals that are attainable. You know, don't like, you know, it'd be great if people had the goal to come out there and run H pattern outlaw stick shift and, you know, dive into the sixes. You know, I mean, I want to see all that grow, but, you know, people, you know, if you have realistic goals, you know, that are more easily met, I think you know, it keeps you motivated. You know, if you spend way too much money outside of your, you know, your budget or your capability, you know, you get just, you know, just discouraged and whatever. So, I mean, the best advice for anybody racing anything is just build a car that you can maintain and enjoy it for what it is. You know, you don't have to be, you know, the guy that's holding the record or, you know, winning drag week or whatever. It's just build a car and enjoy it, and, you know, go out there and compete and finish, and, you know, that kind of stuff.
yeah, I think Rich would agree that people severely underestimate, especially in stick racing, and we like to make fun of the auto guys too, but this would include them as well. I think they really underestimate what it takes to maintain, like, let's say a 9-second car or an 8-second car. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of nuts, like really. And we talk about this a lot and what poor life choices we've made. But but there's so much to check and maintain, and just to maintain the safety factor and the reliability, and just to keep it all together.
Yeah.
Like a 12-second car, man, those are easy days. I used to change oil and maybe spark plugs, and I drive it all summer.
Yeah.
And 8-second car, it's a whole different game.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll do a lot. I'm looking for the picture of Bill and I with our parachutes out side by side, but I can only imagine when you made that 660 pass. Like, did you think you went that fast? Like, it must have felt fantastic going through the traps, even though you could see Garrett's taillights, but he cheated.
Yeah. I mean, I knew it was going to be faster than a 675 because we turned it up a little bit. Of course, you know, the sun went down, so the air got much better. So I didn't think it would have, you know, been a 661, but, you know, I figured it could get in the 660s, you know, so.
And
Well,
the G's
yeah.
are the G's that you were pulling on that pass pretty normal for you? Like, that was a 247. I slowed it down and looked quite a few times. Might have been
Yeah.
50, but
Well, that's one piece of data that I really don't pay much attention to. I mean, I got the G meter, the Holly G meter in the car, and, you know, I sent the log file to that guy that made that overlay. I mean, that's not something I made. It's just a guy that he does that for a lot of, you know, faster cars. You know, it's just interesting. He's probably got all kinds of cars on his YouTube channel doing that with, but he more or less picked out that piece of data that he put on there. So I don't even know how that would compare to, you know, an average pass, because I just don't look at that number. But I mean, it didn't feel crazy or different. I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, you get used to your car, whether you're running you know, if you went eights for the first time, you know, getting out of a 10-second car, you know, it'd feel mind blowing, I guess, how fast it was if you've never been in the eights. But you make a few passes and you get used to it. And in my car, I mean, 660s, it feels like, you know, a 7 flat pass. I mean, the car's calm and, you know, controlled, and, you know, there's not a lot of driver input except for just grabbing the next gear. So it feels, you know, just pretty mild or under control. It don't feel like it's that fast.
You made it look pretty mild as you were whistling down the tractor.
Yeah, totally. Well, Jonathan, I really want to thank you, both Rich and I, for sure, for your time tonight. This has been enlightening, and it's probably going to cause us to make some more poor choices, but it's all good. I do want to, again, huge thanks to Stick Shift Nation for hosting the podcast. And you can now find the Clutch Burners podcast on 9 different platforms, YouTube, and then all the other podcast platforms on, you know, your phone or whatever. And if you'd like to see us continue and grow, head over to stickshiftracing.com and grab a Stick Shift Nation shirt or sticker and let us know. We haven't done any Clutch Burner stickers or shirts or anything, but if that's something you're interested in, then you might be able to twist our arm a bit.
Yeah, I want to thank you too. I mean, we tried to get you on here before you broke the record, but doing it after you broke the record just made it that much more special, because that was pretty cool. That was like we said, it definitely broke my Facebook. Like every like, geez, I've seen that video like 8 times now. Like, what else is on here? So it was pretty cool too. I mean, I know Garrett as well, so yeah, it was pretty phenomenal. So really appreciate your time, especially on your son's birthday. So give him our best.
Yes.
And
yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me do this.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan.
Have a good one.
All right. Have a good one.